Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Jazz Trumpeter Steph Richards. We caught up with her during the COVID-19 lockdown world on June 7, 2020 to talk about her life in music and how things have changed. Before the release of her 2018 debut, Fullmoon, she had steadily established herself in New York City as an engaging experimentalist on the scene, recording with pioneer artists like Henry Threadgill, Anthony Braxton, John Zorn, David Byrne, and even Yoko Ono. Please get to know her and dig this interview.
Hey, Joe. How's it going?
Hey, man alive. These are interesting times. You can put it mildly. Wow.
Yeah, right?
If anybody was looking for a silver lining to this pandemic, I think it's really in our face in a way that is unavoidable now.
Yeah, right? It's pretty unbelievable. Beautiful is not quite the word, but in some way it actually really is beautiful, like the humanity that's coming forward out of this to actually move things forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we don't have any more diversions. And a lot of people that are affected by this we've gone from pretty much something that's going to be centered on race, more or less, to total class war. Because this is really about the fact that those that have and those that have not, there's a massive chasm. There's a massive level of this where it's like, you know what? This is it. Because, these have been happening. These egregious deaths have been happening for so long that there's been a sporting event or a concert or another thing that's diverted everybody and kind of railroaded us to another thing. And now there's nothing. And there's total ambiguity as to when things are going to be diversionary again, So it's like game on.
Yeah, exactly.
I figured talking about music probably is a good idea right now, so thanks for taking a minute out.
Of course, yeah.
And,
I'm more than happy to. It was so nice to get your email.
Cool. Well, good. I'm glad. And so let's talk about, I guess, what was your personal story on when you realized that this whole COVID world was sinking in? What gigs in like early March were getting canceled? How did you know, oh man, this is it?
I mean, I think, so beginning of March, I think for all of us, right? That's when it was kind of like, pretty much suddenly we're going to have to start staying home. And I had a pretty big tour in Europe set up in mid-March. And it was my first solo tour. It was my own band that I was touring around. And there was one pretty big gig that was kind of nestled in there. So that was called off immediately. And I remember thinking, because I got a teaching gig at a university a couple years ago, and luckily they still let me tour and travel as much as I need to. But being a freelancer is really still fresh in my mind. And so I remember thinking, you know what, I got to pay my guys no matter what. And I had the funding I had some grant funding to help with that tour. Yeah, I basically prepaid because the major gig that kind of paid the most to keep the whole tour going, they rebooked for a year from now, pretty much right away. They're like, we're just going to do this next year. Keep it in your books. The money's still there. Like, it was Germany, so we can be grateful that they had their act together there. And so basically I prepaid my bandmates, and I was like, just hold a date for next year. Because who knows when we're going to be able to, pay our rent again, that kind of thing. So anyway, it kind of hit me right immediately from a professional standpoint. Yeah, that's a long story, but hopefully that kind of gives you a picture. And then after that, good. All the gigs, it was like the cards just kept falling. It was like, all the things that were set in stone suddenly got erased. And then anything that was sort of TBD, like I had another tour in the fall. I had this new record coming out, and I'm happy to tell you about it because the premise is pretty fun because it uses smells as part of the music. But anyway, so that was this, that was another big trip to Europe with a new band, and yeah, that's definitely just in the mist. There's nothing in the calendar. It's such a strange feeling.
Oh, yeah, and I'm hearing a lot of people say, things are popping up on their phone, like reminders, and it's very strange, and I get that. I mean, I totally can see that being very weird. So, you're originally from Canada, and talk to me a little bit about, kind of your childhood and how jazz became your life.
I think it honestly was just hearing and encountering this music first, from a pretty early age was it was just in my bones. Like I loved dancing and I loved funk music and I loved popular music. I wasn't one of those kids that was brought up necessarily on Mahler and Dvorak, although that came pretty, later on. But yeah, I listened to a lot of popular music, a lot of Earth, Wind and Fire and Parliament and oh man, even like James Brown, man, I listened to him a lot too. And so that kind of was luckily my parents, had great taste. So I think that was inside from an early age. And then musically speaking, my performing influences, I actually grew up playing in a Scottish band, in a pipe and drum band, and there are similarities in the sense that, we're playing these cyclical tunes that are pretty groovy, in my opinion, and it's folk music. And the instrument I played was the tenor drum, which is this instrument where the players, they spin their drumsticks, they flourish in these amazing choreographies that go along to the music. And there's a lot of improvisation inside the choreography. And so I kind of grew up in playing this strange traditional folk music that actually has, a really, now when I see the kind of music I play now, and I'm so interested in choreography as, an experimental musician and interested in kind of how do we bring in the senses and what kind of interesting physical spaces can we perform in. I mean, this was all stuff that I was being exposed to at an early age through this Scottish pipe and drum band where we'd go and play, a parade, a rodeo, and then we'd go play like an American Legion, little community hall. We played all sorts of venues. We play huge stadiums sometimes, if there's a huge competition. So that really was an interesting experience that I look back on and I think, man, I didn't realize at the time what an influence it would have on my curiosity now as a professional.
What was the first live show you saw that made you think this is what I want to do with my life?
Whoa, I've never had that question, Joe. That's a great question. I'm having trouble trying to find live. I mean, there's two early memories. One of them is basically just watching my older sister play, in her junior high jazz band. And I think that was probably a big influence on me, to be honest, just to see someone you love up on stage and sort of transformed by a whole ensemble of other people. That was one thing that really dazzled me. I think another one was, as a really young kid, there was a fiddle player, a Canadian fiddle player, who played, Canadian Northeastern folk music. But he'd kind of groove along. His name was Ashley McIsaac. And I remember seeing a live show of him playing, and I was super, super into it. He had a lot of stage presence, and that was pretty exciting to me. And then, of course, as I grew older, there's performances that I'll never forget. Seeing James Brown play live, seeing Wayne Shorter play. These masters, I'll never forget the way that they can command a room.
What about mentors? Who have been really big that have been instrumental in the way that how you've lived your life as a musician?
Happy to share that one. Probably the most important mentor to me was Butch Morris, who he played cornet for a long part of his career, and then he created this system called conduction. It's this sort of language of standing up in front of a bandstand and with physical gestures, letting the musicians in the band kind of respond to how the conductor is gesturing. And so Butch had a really specific, beautiful language, and he'd always call really awesome improvisers in New York to get together, and we'd play every week, usually for, just enough to cover free drinks. But we all did it because we loved Butch and we believed in him, and he believed in his vision so much that it was just so inspiring to be there. So, yeah, and I remember the first time Butch heard me play, he kind of pulled me aside and he said, I'll never forget, because the first thing he ever said to me was, "You're not a trumpet player." And he just looked at me and I was like, what does that mean? And he meant it as a compliment, because I think what he meant is that I don't play the instrument like a trumpet player would or something. Anyway, so he became really close. He kind of showed me around New York City. He'd take me to different shows. Sometimes, I'd play a show with him and he'd invite other people to come here to hear me play. And I learned so much from Butch. And that's how I met Henry Threadgill, actually. I was playing a show with Butch, and Henry was in the audience. And Henry was a very good friend of Butch's. And so, yeah, I met Henry, and then from there, started playing with him, and he's been a huge influence on me as well. Butch has since passed away, but I still count Henry as one of my closest mentors, very much musically and also spiritually. I think there's something about being with him, seeing how he is true to his artistry and has been his whole life, and he is so committed to the vision and the importance of the fact that this thing we do is life or death. It's not a joke. It's not just entertainment. It's bigger and deeper and more, what's the right word? Limitless and timeless, So anyway, I would just tell you that Butch Morris and Henry Threadgill are two beautiful, incredible humans that have had a huge influence on me.
So what do you like best about being a musician?
Right now, when we're cooped up at home, or general? when you're at full strength and you're doing everything and you're doing your thing, what's the best thing about it? I think it's the people, and I mean that in two ways. One of them is the community of artists, and Joe, because you're hanging with musicians all the time with your podcast, and the community, being an artist, the quality of humans that we get to spend our time with, the friends that we get to hang with, the people we share the bandstand with. I think it takes incredible intelligence and grace and courage to do what we do. And I think I just feel so lucky for the people that I get to work with every day. And then, the other side of it is, and this is a major thing I miss right now, is being on stage and playing to a room full of people and feeling like, here's what Butch would say. He would call it prose communion. There's a communion that's happening in the moment when you're playing a show, and there's no words for it. And when the show's over, people leave. You might never ever see them again, but there's this moment that we're all together in the same moment. We're all creating, as an improviser, whoever's in the room, whoever's breathing and whoever's heart is beating in that moment, everybody is a part of that sound. Everybody has an influence on what's going to come out on stage. And so that's really what I miss. And that would be the number one thing as to why I do what I do, is those moments of communion.
So when we do get back to the stage, it's going to happen. What do you hope both the musician and the audience realizes about this time away from live music?
That there's no replacement. I mean, we'll see which venues survive when we get through this, and we'll see how many of us musicians can hang in New York and other big cities where there's scenes, and even small cities. I mean, we'll see who makes it, but basically, I think that the thing I hope we learn from it is that there's no replacement. I mean, Zoom, everybody's working hard. There's amazing creativity I'm seeing online. All these awesome videos people are making from their homes. All these duos of two partners at home that are suddenly playing together all the time. You're getting to hear these amazing duos all the time now, but there really is no replacement to, like I'm saying, that feeling of being in a room, that visceral feeling of breathing with a room full of people and creating together. So, I hope that's a lesson. I mean, we could talk politics, we could talk about arts funding, we could talk about education and, all those things. I mean, I would love for there to be a major reprioritizing of how we value the currency of empathy, and how that is where humanity evolves out of, you know what I mean? And we get that from being artists, everybody, and being exposed to art and creating art together. And I think if we had a really stable foundation of that in our culture, in our society, in the States, I think we would see some progress. in a lot of different ways. So there's my mega, yes, like, that's my like super optimistic, I wish this could happen. And, like what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, I mean, this amazing social achievement or progress that's happening right now with our solidarity to all of our Black Americans. And like you're saying, that's what is also a form of major class warfare as well, Who knows? Maybe we'll keep moving.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Well, I'm going to save the hardest one perhaps for last, and it's this. Everyone has their perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are, Joe? Just kidding.
Right, that's what should have happened for a long time ago. You know what? I'm going to take you by the lapel and ask you, punk.
At the end of the day, I think I'm just trying to get by, and I mean that in the sense that I'm trying to live as true to myself as I can. That's I hope that's not too cheesy for you, but I feel like at the end of the day, that's what I'm just trying to do my best to be as true to myself. Yeah. And musically, that's
I like it.
The easiest way that I can do that, because sometimes it's hard on a personal way to maybe be totally exposed and honest about who I am. But with my horn on my face, it's a lot easier, I think, to get to the truth. So that's why I keep coming back for more.
Right on. Well, that's a great answer. Thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz today. Stay safe. Good luck with everything.
Oh, thanks so much, Joe. You take care.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Steph for her time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.